I was standing in the kitchen, still wearing my graduation gown when my mother walked in, placed her coffee cup on the counter, and told me the family business I'd spent 4 years preparing to join was going to my sister instead. Her voice was casual, almost cheerful, like she was announcing dinner plans. "Madison gets the company," she said. "Your father and I already signed the papers." Before I could process what I'd just heard, she smiled that tight, practiced smile I knew too well, and added, "You understand, don't you? Madison's always been better with people." But what my parents didn't know was that I'd already seen the company books, and the secret I discovered 3 months ago was about to unravel everything they thought they controlled. My name is Cecilia Grant, and for most of my 26 years, I learned how to be the responsible daughter. Not the favorite one, not the celebrated one, just the reliable one who showed up, did the work, and never complained loud enough to be heard. Growing up in Denver, our family looked flawless from the outside. My father built Grant Media Solutions from nothing, turning a small marketing firm into a regional powerhouse. My mother managed the public image, hosting charity events and making sure our family name appeared in all the right circles. And Madison, my younger sister, she was the star of every room she entered. Madison had a gift for charm. She could walk into a client meeting unprepared and leave with everyone convinced she was brilliant. She posted perfectly curated photos online, collected compliments like currency, and somehow made laziness look like confidence. Meanwhile, I spent my college years studying business management, interning at competitor firms, taking extra courses in digital strategy, anything that would make me indispensable when I finally joined the company. I thought my parents saw it. I thought they noticed the late nights I spent researching market trends, the presentations I built without being asked, the way I memorized every detail of our client portfolio. But appreciation has a way of being selective in families like mine. When Madison barely scraped through community college, my parents called it finding herself. When I graduated summa cum laude, they said I'd done what was expected. The warning signs were always there. At family dinners, my father would ask Madison about her ideas for the company, vague, half-formed thoughts she'd clearly invented on the spot. He'd nod thoughtfully like she'd just delivered a keynote speech. When I'd offer strategic suggestions backed by research, he'd say we'll think about it and change the subject. My mother was subtler. She'd praise Madison's people skills, her natural leadership, her ability to make clients feel special. And she'd look at me with a kind of distant fondness reserved for dependable appliances. Still, I kept believing that competence would win. That when it came time to decide who would lead the company into its next phase, my parents would choose substance over performance. I was wrong. Graduation day should have felt triumphant. I'd worked relentlessly, finished my degree in 3.5 years, and landed a competitive internship offer I'd turned down specifically to join the family business. My parents had promised, repeatedly, that there was a place for me. A leadership role. A future. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Cap and gown, speeches about limitless potential, families cheering as names echoed across the auditorium. My parents attended, sitting near the back, leaving early to beat traffic. Madison didn't come at all. She texted me a thumbs-up emoji and said she'd see me at home. When I walked through the front door that evening, still wearing my gown because I'd driven straight from campus, I expected at least a cake, maybe a card. Instead, I found Madison sprawled on the living room couch scrolling through her phone, and my mother in the kitchen pouring herself wine. That's when she told me. Casual. Matter of fact. Like she was informing me the mail had arrived. "We've made a decision about the company. Madison's going to take over operations. Your father thinks she has the vision we need moving forward." I stood there, cap still pinned in my hair, diploma in my hand, feeling the room tilt slightly. What about me? My mother sipped her wine, avoiding eye contact. "You'll always have a place, Cecilia. Maybe in client relations or project coordination. Something that suits your strengths." My strengths. The ones I'd spent 4 years sharpening specifically for this moment. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask how Madison, who'd never completed a business course, who couldn't explain a balance sheet if her life depended on it, was suddenly qualified to run a multi-million-dollar company. But I didn't. Because somewhere deep down, I already knew the answer. Madison looked the part. She had the charisma, the effortless confidence. And in my parents' world, appearance had always mattered more than ability. I went upstairs to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of my bed in the dark. The diploma felt heavy in my hands, like a receipt for something I'd never actually purchased. That's when I remembered the files. 3 months earlier, I'd been helping my father organize his home office when I stumbled across a folder labeled estate planning. I wasn't snooping. It was sitting on his desk, half open, documents visible. But what I saw made me pause. Financial projections showing the company hemorrhaging money. Loan agreements with terms that didn't make sense. And a series of transfers, large sums moving out of business accounts into personal ones, all signed by my father. I'd taken photos with my phone, not because I planned to use them, but because something felt wrong. Something felt hidden. Now, sitting in my room with my graduation gown pooling around me, those files didn't feel like a coincidence anymore. They felt like the truth my parents were desperately trying to bury. I opened my laptop and pulled up the images. Numbers that didn't add up. Payments labeled consulting fees going to shell companies. Tax documents that contradicted the profit margins my father bragged about at dinner parties. And then I saw it. A memo dated 2 weeks ago outlining a plan to transfer ownership to Madison while simultaneously securing a buyout deal with a competitor, one that would let my parents cash out and leave Madison holding a company already stripped of its value. They weren't giving her the business because they believed in her. They were giving her the liability. And they were doing it now, before I could ask questions or demand transparency. My hands didn't shake as I saved everything to a secure drive. My breath didn't catch. For the first time in years, I felt something other than disappointment. I felt clarity. The next morning, I didn't confront my parents. I didn't accuse Madison or demand explanations. Instead, I called someone I trusted, Elliot Marsh, a corporate attorney I'd met during an internship. We'd stayed in touch, mostly professional check-ins, but he'd always told me if I ever needed advice, his door was open. When I explained what I'd found, he didn't hesitate. Come to my office. Bring everything. 2 hours later, I sat across from Elliot in a sleek downtown office that smelled faintly of leather and cold brew. He reviewed the files in silence, his expression shifting from curious to grim. Cecilia, this isn't just messy bookkeeping. This is fraud. If these transfers are what they look like, your father's been siphoning company assets for years. I swallowed hard. Can they get away with it? He leaned back, folding his hands. Not if someone reports it. But whistleblowing on your own family, that's not a small decision. I know, I said quietly. But letting them scapegoat Madison while they walk away clean, that's not a decision I can live with either. Elliot nodded slowly. Then let's build a case. Not for revenge, but for accountability. We spent the next 2 weeks gathering everything. Bank statements, emails, meeting notes my father had carelessly left accessible. Elliot contacted a forensic accountant who confirmed what we suspected. The company was being deliberately drained, debts shifted, assets hidden. And the buyout deal my parents were negotiating would leave Madison legally responsible for millions in undisclosed liabilities. It was a trap. A beautifully wrapped trap with my sister's name on it. Part of me wanted to warn her. To sit Madison down and explain that our parents were using her the same way they'd used me, just differently. But Madison had spent years basking in their favoritism, never questioning why I was always overlooked. And when I'd tried to talk to her once, gently suggesting she learn more about the company before taking it over, she laughed and said I was jealous. So I didn't warn her. I let the pieces fall exactly where my parents had placed them. 3 weeks after graduation, my parents hosted a formal dinner to announce Madison's new role. Clients, employees, even a few reporters attended. The dining room glowed with candlelight and expensive wine. Madison wore a designer dress and practiced her speech in the hallway mirror. My mother fluttered between guests, beaming with pride. My father stood at the head of the table, ready to pass the torch. I arrived late, slipping into the back of the room just as my father began speaking. "Tonight," he said, voice rich with emotion, "we celebrate the future of Grant Media Solutions. My daughter Madison will be stepping into leadership, and I couldn't be prouder." Applause rippled through the room. Madison stood, gracious and glowing, accepting congratulations like she'd earned them. No one mentioned me. No one asked where I'd been or why I wasn't at the table. I was invisible again, exactly as I'd always been. But invisibility has advantages. No one noticed when I handed a slim folder to Elliot, who stood near the doorway. No one saw him pass it to the investigator we'd hired, a man who'd been quietly documenting everything for weeks. And no one realized that by the time dessert was served, the walls were already closing in. The first crack appeared the next morning. A regulatory notice arrived at the company, triggering an audit. My father's face drained of color when he opened the envelope. My mother demanded to know who could have reported them. Madison, still floating on the high of her announcement, didn't understand why everyone suddenly looked so tense. The second crack came 3 days later when the forensic accountant's report landed on the desk of the district attorney. Elliot had been careful, methodical, making sure everything was airtight before moving forward. And when the authorities started asking questions, my parents had no answers that didn't incriminate them further. I watched it unfold from a distance, living in a small apartment across town I'd rented the week after graduation. I didn't gloat. I didn't call to check in. I simply waited, knowing that the truth, once set in motion, doesn't need an audience. Madison called me finally, 2 weeks into the investigation. Her voice was small, confused, stripped of its usual confidence. "Cecilia, something's wrong. The company, the accounts, none of it makes sense. Dad's not answering my questions." I could have said I told you so. I could have reminded her of every time she'd dismissed me, every moment she'd basked in favoritism while I worked twice as hard for half the recognition. Instead, I said, "You should get your own lawyer, Madison. One who doesn't work for Mom and Dad." There was a long silence. Then, quietly, "Did you know?" I paused, weighing my words carefully. "I knew something was wrong. And I knew you deserved to know the truth before it buried you." She hung up without saying goodbye. A week later, the buyout deal collapsed. The competing firm pulled out once the financial irregularities became public. My father was forced to step down pending investigation. My mother retreated from social events, her carefully curated image crumbling under scrutiny. And Madison, the golden child who was supposed to inherit an empire, was left holding nothing but debt and broken promises. The company didn't survive. It was liquidated to cover liabilities, employees given severance, assets sold off piece by piece. My parents faced legal consequences, fines, settlements, the kind of fallout that comes from years of cutting corners and believing you're untouchable. Madison moved out of state, taking a junior position at a firm that didn't know her name. We haven't spoken since. People ask me sometimes if I feel guilty, if I regret exposing my own family, dismantling the business my father built, ending the legacy my mother was so proud of. And the answer is no. Not even a little. Because what they built wasn't a legacy. It was a lie. And the moment they decided I wasn't worth including in their plans, they made it clear I was never really part of the family they wanted to protect. I didn't destroy the company out of spite. I didn't report them for revenge. I did it because watching them sacrifice Madison to cover their crimes while I stayed silent would have made me complicit. And I'd spent enough years being complicit in my own erasure. 6 months after everything fell apart, I accepted a position at a competitor firm, one that had been courting me since my internship. They didn't care about my last name or my family scandal. They cared about my work, my strategy, my ability to see problems before they became disasters. I started small, proving myself in ways that had nothing to do with legacy or favoritism. And slowly, carefully, I built something that was entirely mine. Not handed to me, not inherited, earned. My parents never apologized. They never acknowledged what they'd done or how they'd treated me. And honestly, I don't need them to. Their approval stopped mattering the moment I realized it was never based on who I actually was. Madison sent me a message once, months later. Just 3 words. You were right. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because there was nothing left to say. She'd made her choices. I'd made mine. And we were both living with the consequences. Looking back now, standing in my own apartment with a career I built from scratch, I understand something my parents never did. Strength isn't about being the loudest or the most charming. It's about knowing your worth even when no one else sees it. It's about protecting yourself when the people who should protect you choose not to. They thought they were handing Madison a gift. Instead, they handed her a trap. And the only reason she survived it at all was because I refused to let them bury us both. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever been overlooked or underestimated by the people who should have believed in you most, share your thoughts in the comments. You're not alone. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't loudness or confrontation. Sometimes it's simply choosing yourself when no one else will. Subscribe for more true stories about family, betrayal, and finding your own path forward. Because strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet choice to walk away and build something better.